It was a sunny afternoon, and a group of children, including Ju-won, were gathered in the open field, laughing as they played a word game. The teacher instructed them to name three-syllable words, and Ju-won blurted out, "widower." The other children turned to the teacher, puzzled, and asked what it meant. The teacher chuckled and replied, describing a widower as someone who can do anything. Ju-won thought to herself, her father was also a widower, so if he could do anything, maybe he could get her a brother. Ju-won's father, Mr. Yoon, a devoted restaurant owner, waited for Ju-won to arrive from school. He was always busy running his restaurant, but his love and care for his daughter never wavered. She looked up at him with her curious eyes and asked, "Dad, are you a widower?" Taken aback, he responded with a hesitant nod. Seizing the moment, that if he was indeed a widower, he should get her a brother, someone to play with, since he was always busy at the restaurant. While walking to their apartment, Mr. Yoon playfully suggested that a new family was moving in and that it might be possible to meet a new brother. Nearing the apartment, they saw the new family moved into the unit above them and Mr. Yoon went to introduce them, meeting San-ha and his parents, Mr. Kim and Young-hee. While Ju-won seems so happy to meet a new boy, she was ecstatic calling her brother, but San-ha seems cold. The encounter was polite but tinged with tension. Young-hee seemed uncomfortable, her gaze a mix of wariness and sadness, adding an awkward edge to their first meeting. The reason behind Young-hee's behavior began to surface. Young-hee was deeply affected by the recent loss of her daughter, an emotional wound that hadn't healed. Blaming her son, San-ha, for not protecting his younger sister, she grew distant from him, her grief fueling arguments with her husband. Their quarrel grew so loud that it drew the attention of a passing police officer, who, upon learning Mr. Kim was the town's new chief, quickly retreated. In the officer's rushed exit, the neighbors caught snippets of the tragedy that had shaken the family. Later, Mr. Yoon noticed San-ha sitting alone on the stairwell, looking despondent. He approached the boy with a gentle invitation to join them, but San-ha, feeling the weight of his family's grief, declined and returned inside. That night, Mr. Yoon explained the concept of loss to Ju-won, drawing parallels to the absence of her mother, to help her understand the pain others carry in silence. Mr. Yoon urged her to be sensitive to others' feelings. Meanwhile in Mr. Kim's apartment, Mr. Kim, in his own way, tried to comfort San-ha, reminding him that his mother's actions were born out of sadness, not anger. Another evening, Ju-won saw San-ha eating raw ramen alone at staircase, and mentioned it to Mr. Yoon. So, he decided to make a meal for San-ha. When Ju-won tried to offer it to him, he coldly refused. But unworried Ju-won ate happily. Days later, an unexpected guest came to Mr. Yoon's home, Kang Seo-hyun and her son Hae-jun, a meeting arranged by an elderly neighbor as a blind date. Their introduction had a humorous start, with Mr. Yoon accidentally splashing Seo-hyun. While Mr. Yoon and Seo-hyun shared an awkward chat, Ju-won was less enthusiastic, only wanting a brother, not a new mother. Sensing the children's restlessness, the elderly neighbor took Ju-won and Hae-jun to a nearby store, leaving the parents to talk. Meanwhile, Hae-jun seemed thrilled about the prospect of their parents meeting, but Ju-won remained uninterested. At the park, they found San-ha being taunted by neighborhood kids about his late sister. Together, Ju-won, San-ha, and Hae-jun confronted the bullies, standing up for one another. This act of unity brought them closer, leading to an apology from the bully and a shared family dinner. Throughout the meal, Ju-won subtly showed her preference for San-ha, hoping for a close connection with him. After dinner, Hae-jun and his mother left, and Mr. Yoon offered to walk them home. As they departed, Ju-won and San-ha played in the park, unknowingly watched by Young-hee from a distance. In a quiet moment, Ju-won shared a photo of her mother with San-ha, explaining that she looked at it whenever she felt sad. This prompted San-ha to reflect on his own memories of his sister, later stealing glances at her picture, showing he, too, carried the weight of her absence. Around this time, Hae-jun's mother, facing financial struggles, temporarily left him with her sister while she worked. She reached out to Mr. Yoon, seeking both his financial help and permission to visit Hae-jun. When he saw the boy's rough condition, he was surprised. Concerned for the boy's well-being, Mr. Yoon decided to take him into his own home, offering him stability and care during this challenging period. In the midst of it all, tensions continued to brew in San-ha's household. One day, Young-hee noticed an old family photo in her son's drawer, which triggered her grief and frustration. Struggling to accept her own son's happiness around the neighbors, she voiced her desire to leave, burdened by the memories she couldn't escape. San-ha, overhearing this, pleaded with her not to leave, promising to avoid the neighbors if it would keep their family together. Meanwhile, at Mr. Yoon's apartment, Ju-won was upset by Hae-jun's presence, fearing it might bring her a new mother. Despite her protests, Mr. Yoon welcomed Hae-jun, allowing him to call him father. This small gesture of acceptance brought Hae-jun a sense of belonging and joy, knowing he had found a new home. But Ju-won noticed San-ha wasn't joining them as before, so she approached Young-hee, hoping to convince her to let them play. Unaware of the depth of the family's struggles, she didn't realize that Young-hee was preparing to leave both San-ha and his father. Even with the strain in their families, Ju-won, Hae-jun, and San-ha continued to share moments together, laughing and bonding during snack runs to the convenience store. Over time, the three children became inseparable, finding joy in their shared lives. As time passed, their families ended up living under one roof, with Mr. Yoon and Mr. Kim joining households. Peace gradually settled over their home, blending the once distinct families into one. One day, ever practical, Ju-won suggested formalizing their family ties through adoption. This sparked a humorous debate as the family tried to decide who would adopt whom, each laughing at the tangled web they'd created. In a playful yet determined tone, Ju-won declared, sharing their last name is the only chance for her survival.